Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is the second of our festivals and events learning series for spring 2026. We had a great session last week and happy to have another great session happening this morning. We've been working with Festivals and Events Ontario now for a few years to offer these webinars, and we're excited to be continuing that partnership. And on behalf of GMIST, I just want to thank Festivals and Events Ontario because they work really hard to bring us topics that are really timely and really useful for festival and event organizers. So we're pleased to have a chat this morning about emergency preparedness. And I'm going to pass it right over to Debbie Mann from Festivals and Events Ontario. She's going to guide us through this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, how are you? Thanks for joining us this morning on this supposed to be a spring day, but it's here a little gray in Kitchener, Ontario. But our spirits are good because spring is here, and spirits are good because we're going to be listening to Delores MacAdam, who's got a really great energy and really positive. Dolores is a manager of the City of Ottawa. She is the former president of Stewart Park, or the volunteer of Stewart Park Festival in Perth. And she's also an IFEA, or an International Festivals and Event Association educator. So we have a woman who knows this industry really well and who's going to be talking to us today about emergency preparedness. So over to you, Dolores.
Thanks, Deb, and good morning, everyone. Debbie sent me the list, and so I've gone through the names. Excuse me, and I'm just so happy to be doing something with folks from the East Coast. So those who weren't on earlier, I'm born and raised to Cape Breton. I go home several times a year. I have a cottage down there. I go to the Gaelic College in the summer for fiddle. So you live in residence for a week. But also just to add, to what Debbie's saying, I also sit on the executive of the Canadian Folk Music Awards, and I do some community volunteering as well. But what I did at the City of Ottawa, myself and a team, so it wasn't just me, but we set up SEAT, which was the Special Event Advisory team. That's what it stands for, SEAT. And we also did a special events bylaw for events. So for those in that are here with a municipality, that might be of interest to you, because what we found is that people were coming and doing events in our city, and we were sending them to all different areas, like to get a fire permit, they had to go 20 minutes down the road. Then to get a liquor permit, they had to go somewhere else. So we really coordinated that process. And I will say a lot of municipalities are doing that now. I spent a lot of time going across North America, actually speaking at cities in terms of the processes, and a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today. But that's kind of my thing, so to speak, in terms of so when I'm speaking, you'll know where I'm coming from. It truly is from event experience. At the City of Ottawa, I was the lead for things such as the FIFA games, the Junos, and it's everything from doing the bid to get the games to being the lead for these events. So it was large scale events, but it was also community events. And I will say that the community events were, like, how they say it's not the big things that have an impact on you. So FIFA and Junos, they're all fantastic, but the community events I love, just because it is wrapped around community. So I've done a bit of everything, and I continue to do that stuff. So, but for today, we're going to talk about emergency preparedness. I have looked at the list, and I see the list of guests, and thank you all for joining. I see there's some diversity. So I see, like, there's some folks that are here. So, for example, Tourism Nova Scotia, Economic Development Officer. It's very diverse. So it's not. So what I'm going to do, I won't speak just from putting on an event in your municipality. A lot of the times I speak to municipalities, I go in and train, whatnot. Because this is diverse, I'm just going to speak generally, and then we can have open conversations, if that's okay. Because I want to make sure no one's missing out. For example, if there's an art gallery here or someone who's doing events inside of a facility, I think that's very important that we have that conversation as well. So we'll get started. Does anyone have any questions before we start? No? Is Nicole McCauley on the call? Her name was on the list. I just didn't know. I don't know
I
Nicole.
don't think she's registered. I don't think she's on.
Okay.
No, she's not on.
I don't know Nicole, but she is in Sydney, Nova Scotia, which is where I'm from. So I was just going to say a welcome. Okay, we're going to get started. So the whole idea with emergency management, as we know, it's really about keeping people safe, and whether the event is indoors or the event is outdoors. So we're going to talk about that, and it's also it's keeping people safe, and these things. We want people to, it's reputation, there's reputational risk, as we know, and we want events coming into our city. There is an economic impact with that, right? With them coming in. Oh, we have Kevin Kennedy. Debbie, someone just jumped on here.
Yep.
Oh, hi,
I just let him
Kevin.
in. Yep.
Oh, Kevin?
Hi there.
You
How are you?
good? How are you? I was going to talk about you at this session, but I guess I can't do that now.
Sorry,
So,
I'm just at Molly's. She's sick. Andrew's sick. The kids are sick. I'm wearing a mask.
oh, well, Kev, if you're okay, I'm going to introduce you to everyone. So we're just getting started. So what I was sharing with them is the work that I did in Ottawa, and I talked a little bit about SEAT, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that. But I'm glad you're on. So for everyone, Kevin Kennedy and I worked very closely for years together. Kevin was with Ottawa Police, and he was part of when I talked about forming SEAT, the Special Advisory Team. Kevin was instrumental in that as well. So Kev, I'm talking generally, Kev, not just about festivals, because as you and I both know, emergencies can happen indoors or outdoors. And the list of guests that are here today, it's diverse. So I want to make sure we're capturing everyone. But feel free to jump in, Kevin. So why emergency preparedness matters? It's about public safety. The thing is, as I mentioned, you want people coming back to your city because they felt safe when you're a city. But most important, you want people going to your events. And as the owner of the event, we have a responsibility to make sure people are safe at our event. And I'm going to go through that a bit further. There's also regulatory compliance. So, the municipality you're hosting your event in, there's municipal regulations, there's provincial regulations. So you need to make sure you're addressing all of those when you're setting up your emergency plan. And there's also reputational management. So if you think of a city that held an event, it could be indoors or outdoors. And if something were to happen at that event and it was got to the media that they just didn't plan properly for this event. Sometimes that does happen when there's a riot. You need to be prepared for it because it could really ruin and tarnish the reputation of your event or municipality. You want to make sure you meet insurance requirements. And for those who are on a board, what I would recommend to you is to make sure you have board, like director's insurance as part of your insurance policy. So I don't know if you, so an example with that would be, so if an event happened and you're on a board, so let's say it's a not-for-profit, you're on the board, event happened and there's an incident, somebody's hurt, they can sue the board. So if the board does not have insurance for the board members, it has happened, and I'm not saying this to scare anyone, but I think it's important for people to know that when they sue the board, and again, if there's no insurance, they can actually go after your personal property, the personal property of the board member. So always make sure that you have that. And if you go to a board, if you're going to join a board, you want to make sure that insurance is in place to protect you and your family. So in Canada, we have the risk of landscape, right? We have weather conditions. It's not as though down south we have the risk of snow, we have the risk of rain, we have public safety concerns, we have infrastructure. I don't know about any of you, but in our city, our infrastructure is quite old, so there's risks with that. And also there's operational security threats. And as we all know now, cybersecurity seems to be picking up in terms of making its way into everything. So that is a risk. The risk assessment, there's hazard identification. So Kevin does a lot of this. So Kev, I don't know if you want to jump in. I just don't want to, I want to respect his role.
No, it's okay. Keep going.
Okay. So there's hazard identification. That's part of your risk assessment. Likelihood of, the weather storm. Some people for outdoor, they do hire weather services, and I would recommend that. So basically, for those who don't know, if you hire a weather service program, they will ask you, for example, 2 or 3 contacts for your event. And what they do, they have your cell number and they can tell you the weather patterns and what's coming in. They might say, oh, thunderstorms are rolling in within the next 2 hours. It is worth it to have that it's a peace of mind, because again, we are responsible when we have an event for the safety of others. And you want to make sure you have venue mapping as well. So who are the stakeholders involved in your planning? So in that you would have the municipal government, as I talked about compliance, but municipal government plays a role. So for example, if you're having even an indoor event, you would want to make sure, if you're expecting a large crowd, you want to make sure you have traffic management from the municipality, that they're aware of your event. And they will help you in terms of logistics. So typically the best thing I would recommend you do is I do what's called a circle of stakeholders. So and I can send this out to anyone if they need it after, but basically it's a circle, and identify all the stakeholders involved in an event. So it could be police, fire, paramedics, the transportation system, such as the buses, the taxi system, the hotels, anyone that you think is involved in that event. And this would apply to indoors and outdoors, primarily outdoors, but it is good if it's an indoor event to let others know what's happening. We went, even if it's a huge event, say if you're expecting thousands of people, it is also good to let the hospitals know. And of course, police are always made aware. And the reason you want to let the hospitals know, the hospital that's close by, is if it was a tournament, a soccer tournament with children, and say there was going to be, I'm going to say 500 children, chances are one of those kids are going to get hurt. But you want to, just as a courtesy, let the hospital know, hey, we're having this event, it's 2 kilometers away, just a little heads up. So that is part of emergency planning as well, because you want to make sure your stakeholders are aware of your event. And then, of course, at the city, you would go through the city. You should have a contact at the city. Most likely you would. And then you let the city know, and then they filter it out to their folks within the city that this event is happening. This would apply, as I say, to an indoor event as well, because you could have, if you were having a large concert and you're expecting 18,000 people, that's going to impact traffic, for example, and you want to make sure the city is aware of that, and you would work with the city, even though it's indoors. You want to make sure when I talk about private sector, so such as the hotels, that they're aware as well, because the hotels they could help you actually, because if you're planning a large event, again, indoor or outdoor, if you're talking to the hotels and you're engaged with them, they might be able to offset, like give a discount in the room rates. Might not be a lot, but it could be. And sometimes what the hotels will do is they will decorate. If you give them some backdrops, and if you're expecting a large crowd, you can have backdrops of your event in that hotel. So it just kind of makes it all friendly. But that's a little bit getting away from the emergency side. But you do want an example within a hotel. I remember one time, I'm sure Kevin does too, that we had an incident where there was a race marathon happening in the city and the hotel didn't know. And what happened was the marathon was going down the road past the hotel, but it was around checkout time, 11 in the morning, and people couldn't leave the hotel. So if there was an emergency, that is a huge risk if they had to they would eventually get the ambulance there, but if the more you can tell people, the better. Incident command structure. So what I would say to that is that it's so important when you're planning your event to know what we would call an incident commander, who it is. Now, that's when when you have, so it could be the chair of a festival, it could be the head of an organization if it's an indoor event, but you want to know who is the point person. But once the police and fire and paramedics come along, they're in control. But it's just until they get to you have a support staff on site, emergency services, but you should always have, otherwise you're going to have mayhem. I have seen it where I hadn't seen it, but I teach, as Debbie said, at the International Event Management School in the States. And we get about 250, 270 students from around the world, and you hear their stories. And there's incidences where I've heard stories where people didn't know who the lead was. So then there was mayhem because there was no direct line for communication. You want to set up a command post. So if there was something to happen, where are you going? If it's a festival, maybe it's the tent off, off to the side of the park. If it's in your facility, you'd want to make sure that you have maybe a boardroom assigned. And I noticed that economic development is here, and this is so important for them to know what's happening as well, because they have an investment when they bring an event into the city. And you want clear communication, so unified. But again, once the emergency services are on board, you're still there to help, but you're not the lead anymore. So I think that's very important. Communications. So you want to, I always say, for your municipality or province, your event in general, it is really good to get to know local media. And that can be as simple as calling them, having a cup of coffee. I drink tea, so I had a lot of cup of teas, but you meet with them and share with them what event is happening and when it's happening. Sometimes you'll end up getting earned media for that as well. So earned media is free media. They might put you on a show to talk about your event, but most importantly, they're there to help you promote your event. But if there's an emergency in the city, they can also help you. And that's where you would work with police and them in terms of messaging that's coming out. You'd want to have your channels would be social media. It would be scripts and announcements, but none of that would be done unless you had gone through the emergency services first. And again, that would be a large scale event. If it was a small event, if it was because some small towns do not have police at their festivals, but I would still let the police know what's happening. I can't tell you how important that is. Some will hire security guards to be security at the event. Out here where I am, excuse me, I live in Perth, which is about an hour from Ottawa. So yes, I was involved in events in Ottawa, but when I came out here, they had, I didn't know anyone, and I thought, I want to get involved in the community. So I did get involved with the festival, and the chair was stepping down. So I interviewed and everything, and I became the chair. But what I found was, and this is not to criticize them, but they had no connection because there's no local police in this town. It's the OPP. So it would be the RCMP back east. But they never communicated with them. And I remember this one. So I asked about the emergency plan, and I wanted to look at the emergency plan. I looked at the emergency plan, and there was nothing about traffic, like the egress for traffic. And I remember I went to the person who was responsible for from the emergency side, and I said, when I look at the emergency plan, I do not see an egress for traffic. So here in Perth, we have a hospital, and by the hospital, we have train tracks. And in my mind, we had to make sure if we were evacuating a site, we're not sending people down that way. When I spoke to this person, and I'm not trying to criticize, but I honestly feel that over time, some people don't just like things have had that festival was going on for 30 years, right? So when I spoke to him and I said, well, where are we sending traffic if there's an emergency? And the response I got was, this festival has been going on for 30 years. People know where to go. So that was scary. And I questioned about the hospital and the train tracks, because I said, what if we have to get to the hospital? What about the train tracks if there's a train coming? Don't worry about it. We've never had an incident. So I'm sharing that story because I don't think we can assume that nothing will happen. It's very important to have your emergency plan in place. So we did change the, we worked with the...
Oh, yeah.
Huge deal. Oh, Kev? Oh.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Do you want to talk about that, Kev?
No, sorry. I'm trying to manage a young child here who's 6, and I had to move and pick up my phone and put on my speaker.
Well, you're getting the Grandfather of the Year award. Kevin's a new grandfather. Thanks, Kev. So my point to that is we can never assume. And the next point to that is, again, whether your event is indoors or outdoors, always know that if there's an incident at your event, chances are, like depending on the severity of the event, and if people get hurt, you are probably going to have to attend an inquest. And at the inquest, you need to be able to say you've done everything to make sure that event was safe. There's some things we just can't control, but you want to make sure you have documentation to show that you did your best. You want to have and I say this again for indoor events, depending on the magnitude of it, but you want to make sure you have a safety plan, and you want to make sure you have a traffic plan if people have to egress out. And I don't know if there's anyone here from municipalities, but if there is, my little tip to you would be sometimes, or if you could be here from the province, sometimes respectfully, politicians might have a different idea about the event, and it's just sometimes they're just not aware. Like and I'm not criticizing them. And I have seen them in my career where a decision was made which may not have been the best decision. So what I have always done is I have always sent an email, and I would say my understanding is the direction is to do ABC. I respectfully disagree, but I also respect your role. In that way, it's documented that you're showing that you didn't agree with what was happening. And they mean well, and they're passionate about their communities. But again, I always say, what are you going to say at the inquest? If you can answer that and feel good about it, then you have a good emergency plan in place. And the thing is also is that we all know the world has changed from years ago in terms of the risks at events. And I'm not saying that to scare anyone, but it's just knowing, right, that the more you can plan, the better. We had a session, Deb, I don't know, I think it was with the international group, but human trafficking is becoming a thing now at small town events. So I think we all know what human trafficking is. They lure children away, or teenagers that are attending those events. You want to have some signage in your event that if somebody needs assistance, where they can go. So you could have, I would recommend you have the hand signals if somebody needs help. You should have your volunteers be aware of what those hand signals are. You wouldn't step in. Don't ever step in, you call police. But if you see someone with those hand signals, we do it as part of the training with the volunteers. And then what you would do is just call police. I always say, don't get involved. Just call the police and ask them to come on site and tell them what's happening.
So Delores, just to say on that, we've had on my podcast, I've had somebody come and talk about human trafficking a couple of years ago. And then last year we had somebody come and talk about labor trafficking.
Yes. Yeah. So it is a thing, as much as we hate to say it. And the more you can prepare for that, again, whether your event's indoor or outdoors, but educating people on the language that's used, like hand signals, that is critical. I would even at an event, what we did is we trained the volunteers, but we also put we laminated a sheet with the hand signals and just put them in the porta potty so people were aware. It's not to scare people, it's just so people are aware that it's out there, because it's increasing so much. The other thing I would say for your event, I would not rely on cell phones. So years ago, they would have the dispatch radio. If you're in a rural community, you're at a risk of your cell phone, the tower not picking up your signal. So you should have the dispatch radios. So that's what we do out here in Perth, because it's a rural community. So we would have I'll just tell you this story. So when I came on there, the comment was, no, we don't do that. We just do our cell phones. And I felt very strongly, and it's because of my training and stuff, that you need to have the dispatch radio in case that cell phone was down. And I think of the folks from here in Newfoundland. I don't know, like you have rural communities that maybe like you might have some challenges with cell phones. I know we do here. I know in Cape Breton there is, like where my cottage is, the cell phone's probably not. I'm in Boysdale. So if you think if you know Bedeck, I'm on the other side of Bedeck, but there's an area there that the cell phone just doesn't work. So always think of that. You want to have your like a bullhorn. So if you have to go on stage and tell people if it's an outdoor event, that they have to evacuate. You could have it as an indoor in case because the electrical could go down as well. But I would develop a safety kit. So if there's an emergency, think of a hockey bag, and here everything is in there that we need. The bullhorn, the dispatch radios, everyone should have, like the lead for volunteers should have it, your logistics person should have it, your chair should have it. And if you have security, now we ended up getting OPP to do our festivals. And by the way, they love doing these festivals. The police love it. They love being in contact with community. And with some police, what you can do is they recruit. So you can offer them, we'll allow you to set up like a vendor table where they're recruiting for RCMP or OPP. In exchange, they then provide you 2 or 3 officers or whatever you need. So that's a cost saving for you as well. We want to talk about media and first aid kits. So how many here do training with their volunteers for first aid? Any? I can't really see hands, but first
you can
aid
raise your
training
hand down in reactions if you want. There's a react and people can raise their hand for Delores to see.
I'm just grabbing something. 1 second, Deb.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in on a couple of points that Delores has made?
Yeah, sure. Please, Kevin, go ahead.
Just to reiterate a couple of things that Delores has said. First thing about politicians coming in and dictating how things are to go. Delores knows how I feel about politicians. I won't say anything more than that. Other than to say, when they come in, they're not experts. People have been have been elected into positions. That doesn't make them an expert. So if they're trying to dictate something that doesn't make sense, bring in an expert, bring in somebody that knows that field. And so, for example, traffic or crowd movements, bring somebody in that knows that field, that can provide them with a little bit of an education. The thing with politicians, they tend to have the ability to shut down events because they are the permitting lead. So you always have to navigate that too. But what I would suggest is always document. So if they're making a suggestion and trying to force something, explain to them what the best practices are. And if they still are trying to go against best practices, document. And this leads into the second thing about inquests. I've been through them. They will look at absolutely everything. And if something hasn't been documented, then it didn't happen, period. So you have to make sure that you document everything. And that way it'll protect you in the long run when it comes to if there's a lawsuit or anything like that, it'll protect you to show that you did everything possible to make sure that the event is safe. And the last thing about cell phones, the other reason you don't want to rely on cell phones in an emergency, everyone's going to use the cell phones, towers will go down, guaranteed. Right. So do not rely on cell phones for anything. It might be a convenience thing, but as soon as there's an emergency or any sort of overload into the system, it'll shut the cell phones down. It's happened before. It happened during the Boston Marathon. They lost all cell phone service. And then when the service does get strained, some systems are set up that it prioritizes emergency services cell phones. So just your regular cell phone will get lost and emergency services will be using theirs. Anyway, enough said.
Well, I do want to add on that, Kevin, because just for everyone, Kevin and I have worked together for many years, like, I don't know, 15 years or so, and we've seen so much, right? And Kev, before you came on, I was talking about the special event bylaw. So Kevin and I and a group of others, we worked with legal services to put together the special event bylaw because we literally had events coming in that they just didn't want to let. One we did have, I'll tell you, Kevin, we had I'll just high level it. There was a racetrack in a community and they were doing like a dirt bike race, but they wouldn't. They were on private property, so they felt they didn't need to be in compliance with the city. So, and we tried just. We had no policy. There was no bylaw. There was nothing, right? Anyway, what happened there was the dirt bike, or probably two, this is a number of years ago now, it went off the track and into the audience. There was a number of the medic helicopters. There was a number of ambulances there. So all that to say, because they were not prepared, they didn't have an emergency plan. So the emergency services then came out of the community. So if somebody was having a heart attack in that community, there probably wasn't an ambulance available. So what we did is that was a driver for us to really look at the bylaw. There was no bylaw, and we were very lucky. We had a counselor. I mean, I understand what Kevin's saying because we've witnessed a lot of that. Where, respectfully, some counselors, they might be passionate and not really thinking about what needs to be done. But we did have a counselor who put a motion forward to council to say that an event could not happen in the community unless there was an appropriate amount of, unless there was an emergency plan, and it wasn't affecting, I'm not saying the legal language, but basically it wasn't impacting negatively the residents in that community for emergency services. And that was a game changer for us. So her name was Jan Harder. I'm always very grateful for her because she really helped us get that to the council. But again, not everyone, I know it's not all municipalities here, but so I just wanted to say that. And I understand where Kevin's come. We've had several events that it was a challenge to educate folks on the need to have a proper emergency plan or to have certain egress versus an egress a different way. So you're right, Kevin. You want to make sure also you have like the defib. Most events now, they have that indoors. They probably already have it, but for your event outside, you want to make sure you have that. What we did at the festival here, because we had a hard time getting first aid services for our festival, so we set up our own first aid group. So what we did is we had 4 people. We paid for them to go and take first aid training, like the deeper version of a first aid training. And then what we did is we got sponsors to give us the tent, the beds, a wheelchair, defibs, medical kits. And so we were not stuck with not having the first aid on site. And so now that group, the festival group, is making money because other festivals are hiring that group we put together. So it's kind of a win-win because festivals are, most festivals struggle financially. So throughout the year, we have an opportunity to go to a festival, another festival, or it could be a skate on, the ice rink for 200 people, and they'll want first aid there. So we charge minimum amount, but it is a revenue generator for our festival. So just to mention that. And you would have your medical tent, and further what Kevin's saying, any incident at all, if it's a sprained ankle, you need to have all of that documented. The first aid folks will document it. They should. Just don't leave yourself in a position where you have no documentation of any event. And that's, again, indoor or outdoor, you have to have everything documented. It's all primarily through the public, like the Health and Safety Act, but just to make sure you have all. The other thing we want to talk about is about accessibility. You want to make sure you have accessibility at your event. I know up here, I'm assuming on the East Coast, they have here we have the Ontario Accessibility Act, which requires us to have, accessibility, like even at the festival or your event, to have a designated area for people with accessibility requirements. And that is helpful if you had to evacuate the crowd, where the people in need are as well. That's very important. You want to have, in terms of crowd management, Kevin, I know Kevin's going to jump on this. Kevin, do you want to talk about this? I don't know if he's there. If not, I can. So you want to make sure.
Sorry, I had to step away with the baby again. Sorry.
Okay. Are you here now? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm here. I got the little one with me.
I was just going to talk a little bit, very high level, because again,
I apologize to everybody. This was a last minute thing. Everyone is sick, so I'm just helping out where I can.
It's all good. Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit about crowd management? And keep in mind, some of these events are outdoors and some are inside. Do you want to just high level?
Yeah, real high level. Bottom line, you don't want your event, any part of your event, become high density. That is what causes problems. And when you look at some of the big events that they've had over time, where we've had disasters, they are usually very highly populated. So 50,000 people, 20,000 people. And I know these events don't have, not all events have large crowds like that, but I've got an example that I put in my training where there was only 400 people and 3 people died. It's not the number of people, it's the state of density that causes the issue. So you want to make sure any part of your event doesn't become overly dense with people that can't move. And that has to be taken into consideration when you are thinking about emergencies, because everybody plans for a regular operation, but in an emergency operation where people are moving quickly, there might be a bottleneck, there might be a funnel, there might be a place where people are becoming congested, in which case that could become the crisis area for high density. So that, in a nutshell, there's so much more to crowd science, but
yeah,
that is probably the one thing everyone can look at and go, we got to make sure the density doesn't get too high. And that comes down to anything over 3-4 people per square meter.
So when we were putting, you'll remember this, when we were putting the bylaw through for special events, we didn't want to have a number, because to what Kevin's saying is you could have 50 people in the room and there could be a risk because of density, but we couldn't get the bylaw through unless we put a number of 500, and that was through council. That they just wouldn't pass it. They wanted a number. But Kevin's right. So just keep that in mind as well, right? In terms of like the crowd density is so important. And again, that links back to accessibility and making sure there's a path for people to be able to move out. And the other thing to keep in mind is if you're, so I'm involved in a national award group. And so every year we go to a different city, typically a different province, but we have after hour parties. So we have the award ceremony, and then there's an after hours party. And that's typically held at a local pub where, you work in partnership with the pub, and they're responsible for the alcohol and everything. But if it's our event, we have a responsibility for what's happening to the people leaving at the end of the night. So always remember that. So we have to have a plan, because you don't want someone coming into your town for whatever the award ceremony, and then they leave the bar, they're intoxicated, and they get hit by a car. We would be asked, because we have a response. And this is where I also go back to board insurance. You want to make sure that's there. And I'm not saying to scare anyone, but we have a responsibility. Although they're in someone else's pub, and we know that the pubs are supposed to be, not over serving, as a board who initiated this event, we have a responsibility. So just to mention that. The other is Kevin you want to talk about road closures and that you may need, which I alluded to earlier. That's where you have to go to your municipality to have the road closures in place. I would always ask the question and never assume. Do folks on the call, do you have opportunities, do you work with your municipality when you're hosting your event? I know it's diverse in terms of the types of events, but do you have people who is a link to your municipality? Do you have someone at the municipality that works with you on your event, whether it's indoor or outdoors? No? I would recommend you do that. I would really recommend. And there's someone here from economic development. I would think they probably have a link at the municipality, if it's at the municipal level, or if it's at the provincial level, they should really be connecting. Always think with the municipality versus the province, the municipality is closer to the ground or to the communities. So make sure you have a representative. And if there was an emergency in your city, you want the city, like you'd have your emergency services, but you want the support of the city. And Deb, were you going to say something?
Yeah, Gary D said yes. Yes to your question. I just want to let you know somebody did.
Gary D.
Gary D.
Is he the comedian, Jerry?
Oh, Jerry. I'm sorry, Jerry D.
Jerry D, are you the comedian?
No, I am
But
not.
I bet you get that all the time.
Well, a couple of times, yes.
You know why I was asking you is because Jerry D, the comedian, his wife is from Glace Bay in Cape Breton, which is where I'm from, and I used to babysit her. So I was just making a connection.
I am in Nova
Say,
Scotia,
hey, oh, you were Scotia? What part?
Wolfville.
Okay, Wolfville. Wolfville's very nice. Yeah. So that's the importance of your link with the municipalities. I would always, as I mentioned, we put together SEAT, Special Event Advisory Team. I would link with not every city has it, but they have something similar. So for example, like in Barrie, Ontario, they have what's called BEST, but it's still the same. And if you don't have one in your municipality and you're interested in having one, I'm more than happy to have the discussion with you on how to do that. It's so valuable. So so for example, when we bid on events like the Juno, the FIFA games, whatever, it was very valuable to show that we have a structure in place at our municipality. So if an event is coming in, the structure is already in place. In terms of we bring together all the stakeholders, police, fire, paramedics, hotels, transportation, kind of like what I talked about, the circle of stakeholders. To me, that's gold for anyone that plans event, is to have that chart. Literally, it's a circle. It can be squares, but I would do the circle. And then as you're planning your event, you just check off, oh, does the business association need to know? Does the taxi industry need to know? Who needs to know? Who's in that area? You can let the businesses know too, which is great because say, for example, I'm just going to pull something out of a hat here. You'd want to, like the restaurants, you want to let them know there's going to be an impact in your municipality. It would be always in the municipality, but it could be driven by the province. You want to let them know that some people are coming in, that they need to prepare. I was speaking, I was in the States and there was a gentleman, he was telling me a story of how no one spoke to the restaurant owners. So what happened was, and it was a smaller town, so the restaurant owners were not prepared for this event that came in town, like in terms of food and staffing. So they got negative reviews, which we all know, like on TripAdvisor, that affects the restaurants. So you want to show them that you're working with them. That's not emergency planning, but to me it is on some level, because emergency can be severe or it's reputational risk, and you don't want that for your place. So put those mechanisms. The other thing is you want to make sure you have your emergency routes well defined and the proper signage there. You want to make sure you've gone over that with your municipal stakeholders again. Even if it's a private event, you need to have that stuff in place. And what I would strongly recommend, and I'm sure Kev would vouch for me on this, is talk to your police. Very typically, you have a traffic management group at the municipality, and they're the ones that do the traffic lights and whatnot. But if there's an incident, it's going to be police that are there. And I would recommend you talk to your chief of police, or you talk to whoever does events. Some police, depending on the size, they may not have someone designated to events, but you still want to talk to them. What we did when we put the SEAT, Special Event Advisory Team, together is we made sure it was the same police officer, the same traffic management person at these events, at the meetings with the stakeholders, to build relationships with the event organizers. And it's been very successful. So again, you want to make sure your emergency routes are well defined. The other thing you want to do is you want to make sure you have a sign that'll say gathering zone. So when you do your housekeeping to say, if something were to happen, there's a plan in place, the gathering zone, go out the door and it's to your left or something, and have a sign there. That's the most, it's so important to have signage so people know where to gather. The other thing, when you're doing your signage, you have it written, but I would also recommend you have a visual, because there are people that they don't read English, they don't read French, which here is like we're a bilingual city up here, but we have a lot of new Canadians, and they're not like English and French is not their first language. So we do everything to try and make sure they understand visually what is happening. The other is, I talked about the maps. I talked about training and exercise for emergency. I can't stress that enough, what's needed for your volunteers. I don't know how many here work with volunteers. You might have a paid team. They should still be trained on emergency management. For the volunteers, the other thing, you want to make sure all of your volunteers, there's a police record check for your volunteers. And I recognize a police record check. I could give you a police record check today that I had done, and then I could do something nasty tonight. I get all that. But it's due diligence. Again, if there's an inquest, you just need to make sure you're protected in terms of what's happening. And they will ask for every file that you have, right? So we've been very lucky because like where I work and in the private stuff that I do, there's been incidences, nothing too catastrophic, but everything is documented and it's kept in one place, so I know where it is and I can just hand it over. The other is you want to have response plans in place. You want to know who your stakeholders are in terms of, like when I talked about the circle of stakeholders, but then you break it down. So who are your stakeholders for communications? Who are your stakeholders to connect with, your politicians? Because you have to do that. The one thing you want to make sure is, one, you go to your municipality. Typically you would be involved with the municipality, but you also want to make sure who's your MP and who's your MP there, because they're going to call asking, and you want to make sure you have proper messaging and consistent messaging in terms of what if there was an emergency, what's taking place, and they'll want to know what the plan is. The other is for media. You want to leave that to the emergency management folks to deal with media. If sometimes the media will push at the municipal level, then that really should come from the mayor's office. What's going to happen next? What's happened? I would not, and I doubt anyone would, but you don't want anyone just jumping into media. Some people want to do that because they like media, but if they're not trained and they're not a representative of a municipality or of your event, typically what will happen is you would have the organizer, whoever their designated comms person is, and you would have the municipality, and typically a lot of the times it's police, there could be paramedics, but you come together and it's consistent messaging. It's all true messaging, but you need consistent messaging, and you don't want volunteers as part of their training. We do emergency planning with our volunteers. You don't want them going on social media putting messaging out. It just creates confusion. It's one line of communication, as I mentioned earlier. Otherwise, you actually could create mayhem. So I'm just looking at the time here, Deb, sorry.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Yeah, so I wanted to leave time for questions, if that's okay with everyone. And I know we've kind of been going back and forth. And I know I've mentioned it before, there's diversity, and I'm here to help you with, if you're planning an event at the Arts Center, or if you're planning a municipal. I tend to be more I'm the city person that is the liaison. Kevin is him and the police and paramedics, they do the emergency, like on site, what's happening and how do you prevent it. And I'm not trying to sell Kevin to anyone, but Kevin, he does do crowd management. He's well trained in crowd management. So does anyone have any questions?
I have one, actually. If you don't mind. You brought up about board insurance, and here in Nova Scotia, we actually have what is called the Volunteer Protection Act, which I don't remember the wording. Let me just see if I can find that. But it talks about protection of volunteers for nonprofit organizations. And
That's great.
yeah, I don't know I don't think I don't know what's happening in other provinces, but certainly that's here in Nova Scotia, and it has been tested in court as well. We've talked to lawyers about this. And I know particularly some lawyers will say you do not need board insurance or directors and officers insurance. Any insurance company will definitely tell you do need it, and many lawyers will actually say you do need it. But the lawyers who are very aware of this and have used it say it protects any volunteers as long as they're acting within their capacity of the organization.
That's really good. Now, Jerry, what if they were paid? So at an event, you have your volunteers, and sometimes in a not-for-profit organization, you'll have board members who are volunteer, but maybe the chair is a paid position.
Right.
That
this
might be a difference, right?
Right. There is a difference. This is specifically for volunteers.
Yeah.
And it was generated about 15 or 20 years ago in response to volunteer concerns around this.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, it is a huge concern. I mean, there was an incident up here, Deb, you'll remember this. Remember the one that was related to alcohol? Remember the young girl, I believe she was killed?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that board, the whole board was being sued, the entire board. And I remember Debbie and I, we were at the Festival Events Conference, I think, and one of the board members was very afraid of losing their home because of this incident. And what it was the person was under the age to be served alcohol. I see Kevin's checking.
Yeah, can I make a quick comment about that?
Sure.
For someone that's been through a number of inquests, they're very thorough when they do an examination of your records and what's been done. Probably more thorough and more in depth than any colonoscopy. So it's not a good thing to go through. The important thing here is that anybody, whether they be a paid person or a volunteer, that they're acting in good faith and working within their training or what they've been designated to do. Once they fall outside that, the lawyers on the plaintiff side will tack onto that, and they will just go at that if your volunteers or your employees are working outside of their training, which goes back to the whole idea of documenting. So make sure that if you have somebody that's coming in as a volunteer or even as a staff worker, that they're given the training and understanding of what they're allowed to do, what they're supposed to do. Because the questions that come out in court are, did you know your job? What was your job? Did you perform your job? And for the organizers, did you properly train them? And if you don't have that documentation, as I said before, it didn't happen. So the courts are just going to look at it like, well, you have no documentation that this took place, so be it. And I'll give you a quick example. Years ago, we had an event. I was working with police at the time. We had an officer that was working a road traffic area. The roads were icy. She called in the city salter. The city salter didn't make it there in time, which is fine. Things like that happen. An old lady came out of the facility, slipped on the ice, broke her hip. Husband actually, not husband, her son actually was there with her. The officer did a great job, got the ambulance, all the rest of it. The son actually sent a letter into the police saying, what a great job she did. This officer, she took care of his mother very well. However, 2 years later, there was a lawsuit. And as part of the lawsuit, the lawyer for the plaintiff sued everybody, sued the facility, sued the city, sued the police, anybody who was involved. The officer came back to me and said, do you have any documentation on this? I said, well, I have the letter that the person sent in saying that they appreciate the work you did. But she said, I didn't make any notes. I requested the salter. The city has no record that I requested the salter. So basically what it came down to is she did not request a salter because there's no record and no record in the notes. So you have to document everything.
You know what, Kevin, I'm going to talk about, Kevin and I were very involved in this, and I believe it's going to be of interest of all of you. So years ago, Kevin, we're going to talk about the Sens Mile.
Oh, yeah.
How quick that happened. Yeah. So what happened was the Ottawa Senators, I'm going to assume you're all Sen fans, they made the playoffs. So someone went on social media on Facebook and said, hey, let's all meet on Elgin Street, which is one of the main arteries in our city, downtown. And it would take 10 minutes to go through the whole story, and I'm respectful of your time. But what happened there is the police saw, Kev, do you want to jump in? The police, they monitor Facebook and whatnot, and they saw that the people that were going to gather on Elgin Street. Kevin and I worked for 2 straight weeks, right, Kev? Like till 1 in the morning and back at 7. And so because of the police, the call we got, someone from police called me and said, hey, heads up, you're going to have, there's going to be an issue downtown. So Kev, do you want to just high level, I just need to be respectful of the time, how we worked together, but more importantly, what we did. And the impact at the end of the day was the cost to the city was $967,000 in overtime and services, because this went on for 2 weeks, right, Kev? Because of playoffs. Yep. And you want to talk a little bit what the police did for the emergency? Because my bigger point to all this is for everyone is always know that someone can go on social media and they can change the dynamics in minutes of your city, of your province, in terms of telling people to gather. So Kev, just over to you.
Yeah, so basically what it became a pre-event emergency situation because there was no planning on this person's part. Long story short, what happened was this male individual had a girlfriend who was the manager of a bar on Elgin Street. And he figured, I'm going to generate business for her. I will make this bar a particular main locale for people to gather, but we'll have everybody gather on Elgin Street. That was his rationale for doing this. But it blew up, and we ended up with like everybody saying they're going down there for this Sens Mile. It became a pre-event emergency because there was no plan. He tried to denounce the fact that he was actually creating an event. He was just trying to get a community together. He's trying to find every way out of it. Ultimately, what it came down to, we had to create a huge traffic plan, transit plan, security plan, emergency plan, all at the cost of the city of Ottawa. Nobody was putting that bill outside of the city of Ottawa. And it took, as Delores said, like for us, 2 straight weeks of just dedicated resourcing to manage the planning and to manage the event. And it was significant.
Like 80,000 people, right, Kev, down on the streets? That was the approximate at the time.
In a confined area, basically.
Yeah, so that goes back to density, like Kevin talked about. There were snipers on the hotels, because it was our Parliament building is there as well. And this was all, and this man would not shut it down. And we had, like, even legally, we went to legal, whatever. He just kept forcing, and it just, so you can imagine the crowd every night grew more and more. We did create what's called the Sens Mile because we thought, okay, we need to be part of this versus like show that we want to be part of it. And then Kevin and his group, they talked to Vancouver where they had a riot, right, Kev? So there was a lot of, we could do a whole nother session on this, but my most important point to you is, never assume nothing can happen within minutes, literally, when it comes to social media. So people can say, gather at the wharf, say in Newfoundland. Gather, and then suddenly, oh, go ahead, Kev.
And it wasn't just people gathering. You got to think about the community around that location.
Right.
They were really negatively impacted by the noise, by the number of people in the area, people defecating or urinating on their lawns, parking issues. The lack of transit, so people who had mobility issues that needed paratransport, we couldn't get paratransport to them. So there was a whole lot of issues other than just that gathering that had another effect or a side effect on the community surrounding it. So it was a significant negative impact to that community. Just because one guy decided, I'm going to do a social media post to generate business for my girlfriend.
Yeah. I will admit, I love the Sens, but by the end of 2 weeks, I was like, Kev, I just want them to lose. I want to lose.
We were hoping they'd lose in 4.
Yes, we were exhausted, right? But anyway, that's so thank you for that, Kevin. So that's kind of, any other questions? And then I'm just going to do a quick takeaway for everyone in time. So here are the top ones to think of. So one, you want to early decisions will prevent chaos. Always remember that. Communication is everything. Confusion creates panic. Clarity creates calmness. Rules must be defined in advance for your volunteers, your executives, whatnot. Make sure you have that. Crowd management is critical. As Kevin said, movement is the highest risk moment. So when people are moving, that is one of your highest risk moments. Plans must be practiced, so you should always do a dry run. They should be documented, and then you do a practice and written out. And folks, I've seen this where if it's a large event and it's in a facility, there's no dry run. It's like, oh, we have an emergency plan. It's fine. Some band is coming and we don't really need to do a practice or a tabletop exercise. I would say you're wrong. You need to plan everything out. You need to do a dry run. And some people will panic. I know Kevin can talk about that too, because even in the dry run. But that's good because you want to know where you have to change some positions up so that people are there. You should always, always, always do a debrief. There's no excuse for not doing a debrief. It's only going to help you to enhance the event the next time, and because you would tweak it. But again, if there was an incident, you have that debrief of what happened, and it has to be well documented. And then I just always end with emergency preparedness it's not just a requirement, it's a responsibility we have as event planners. So that's all I have. I'm sorry we didn't get to have a little chit chat because most of you are East Coasters and I'm an East Coaster living up here.
So, Delores, there's a question. Are there good online resources for this type of work and training I could share with my organization?
Yeah, there is good. I can send some stuff. I know Kevin would have some stuff as well. But whoever's asking, Deb, if you want to just let me know, I can send some of the stuff. There is online training. Online training is really good. Don't get me wrong. I think experience just gives you those little nuggets that takes it to a whole deeper level, right? Kind of like what we were talking about today, Kevin and I.
Okay. I'll send it to you.
For sure. And if anyone needs anything, Kevin, I'm offering you out as well. But so if anyone needs anything, always know I'm here and I can provide you Kevin's contact as well if you want to talk to Kevin. He's, as I say, like he's the police side of it. I'm more the municipal government side of it. And I do private event planning as well. And I sit on the board of the Canadian Folk Music Awards. Very involved in that and festival planning.
And again, my apologies for the unprofessional nature of my call today. I'm usually better than this, but that was a last minute come over and help everyone sick. So we've all gone through it.
You and I have been in the dire needs of emergencies before. I think you look fabulous. It's good. And it's nice to see your families first. That's what's most important.
Thanks, Delores.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
So much. And Kevin, thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom. Nora, thank you for having us again, hosting us again. And have a great summer, everyone. And hopefully we'll be in touch. Reach out to me if you need anything or contacts for Delores and Kevin. Thank you.